Hey Photography Mafia, in this video tutorial I'm going to use DxO PhotoLab 8 to correct the exposure of this image and adjust the colors. There's a lot going on here. You can see it's kind of like highlighted here, but then there's shadows here. And on top of this red-footed booby, it's a little bit blown out, or there's too many highlights. There's red here, green, yellow, a little bit of orange or brownish color here. And of course the red-footed booby's feet here is red and the beak is blue with a little bit of red there as well. I'll just go to this one-to-one view, make sure it looks sharp enough for me, so it does look good. I'll go back to the fit view. And of course the bird droppings here, it could be distracting or annoying, but I'm quite used to it now after being in the Galapagos Islands a few times. And as I just mentioned, this was taken in the Galapagos Islands in a place called Punta Pit on San Cristobal Island. So this area is out of touch to humans, and the only way you can get here is through a tour with a permit. These birds are pretty hard to find throughout the archipelago without a tour, at least from my experience. And they're a little bit smaller than the more common blue-footed booby. Anyways, let's see what we can do with this photo here. And the first thing I want to do is try to correct these highlights or reduce it, because the highlights here are taking away a lot of the attention from the bird, which is slightly in the shadows but also in the sun here. So I'm going to stay in the exposure or light section here, and I'm going to decrease the highlights just like that, see how it looks. We can see the histogram here now, it's kind of pushed to the left. We can see a lot more of the top of the red-footed booby here. Let me increase the highlights here, maybe keep it like that, and maybe reduce the midtones. And I'll reduce the highlights to about -80 and reduce the midtones to about -40. So for sure this image does not look as good now because it's lacking a lot of the dynamic range. Everything's pushed to the shadows. So let me see what I can do here. I could increase the highlights back a little bit more just to make it look a little bit better. The other thing is I want to bring a little bit more focus into this guy right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a mask. I'm going to create a control point mask. And I'm going to click on this guy around here. Get its body. Just like that. Get his feet. Just like that. Get a little bit more of the beak. And I think that looks good. And the good thing about this control point is it's not getting this area here that's totally black. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the DxO Clearview Plus. This is a really good tool just to put a little bit more focus into this guy right here. So let's take a look at the before and after with the local adjustments. Now what I can do is maybe increase the midtones, just brighten it up a little bit. Just like that. The one thing I'm concerned about is the top of the head here. It looks a little bit too bright or white, but that's fine. And let's see what else I can do. The red hue here, I can actually just increase maybe the entire saturation. No, I'll stick with the red hue and I'll increase the saturation. I'll go overboard just to see how it looks. And I'll actually just keep it like that. Let me see this mask and see how it's working on the feet. Okay, it has a good selection. And then we have the beak as well. So I'll go to the cyan hue, increase the saturation, doesn't do much. So I'll go to the blue hue and increase the saturation. And that looks a little bit better now. So we're getting a lot more focus in on this bird. But I do notice the eyes, around the eyes, it looks a little bit more blue than it should. So I'll decrease the saturation just like that. Let me show this mask here and maybe move this point to around here and move this point here. And actually I can probably delete this point. I'll press delete on it, and I think that looks a little bit better. So let me unhide the mask, or hide the mask I should say, and I'll increase the saturation here, and I'll go back to this cyan and increase it a little bit more. I think that's the best I can get its beak and its eyes, or around the eye, looking decent enough. Now this image still looks a little bit on the dark side here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to reduce the highlights here, just like that, increase the midtones a little bit, and increase maybe the shadows slightly. And let's see what happens when I crank up the DxO Clearview Plus. That looks pretty good, so I'll keep it around 80 just to not go overboard. Now I'll go back to the light section here, and I think I can bring a little bit back of the highlights here and a little bit back of the midtones just to brighten up this image here. So I think we're starting to look good here, and let's see what else we can do. So I'm going to go back to this mask here, and the one thing I want to do is adjust this red here. I think I want to adjust it. Let me see, this red on this feet is a little bit too much, so I'll make sure I have this control point selected, go to the red hue, decrease the saturation. I think that looks a little bit better. Let me decrease it all the way just to make sure I got this guy selected correctly. So I'll put that to about 20, 25, I think. Yeah, I'll keep that at 25, just like that. Now, let's see here. Let me see what happens when I add Global Clearview Plus. I'll just activate this. Interesting look, but I think it's too much for me. So I'll go back to the mask here, and I'm going to add to the control point mask a little bit of contrast and a little bit of micro contrast, just like that. And I'm going to select this area a little bit more, or actually what I can do is go to the control point, click on this show mask here, and let's decrease the luma here and decrease the color. No, it doesn't select this area enough here. There's too much grayish area. I was trying to select more of this area, but it doesn't work. So I'll reset the chroma and the luma, and instead what I'll do is I'll create a new mask. I'll press the plus sign here, I'll create a brush here, I'll increase the size to about that, keep the feather and flow at 100 as well as the opacity, and then I'm going to start painting around this guy just like that. And I'm going to change it to the color overlay, and then I'm going to reduce the feather, actually not the feather, reduce the flow and the opacity to about 50-50, and I'm going to paint like this and just keep painting like that, just like that. Now what I'll do is I will increase this Clearview Plus, just add a little bit more like that, increase the shadows slightly, increase the midtones, and now the highlights are coming back on this bird here. So I'll go to this control point mask, decrease the highlights a little bit. Now this bird is starting to look a lot better. So I'm going to change or deactivate this local adjustments just to see the before and after. So this looks really good. Now the one thing is with the color correction or the color grading, there's red here, there's red here, and there's red here. And I'm thinking like this red is a little bit more distracting and taking away from this red. The red here is a little bit washed out, so it's not a big deal. So What I'm thinking I'm going to do is, since this is green, I can add a complement and make this a little bit more magenta or purple. So what I'll do is I will create the graduated filter mask by selecting this and just brushing over here. And actually, I will create a hard transition. So I'll move this just like that. Bring this down like this. So I'm selecting this red bush here. Of course, I can crop and stuff, but I like seeing the entire image. I usually only crop when I decide to print or if I decide to display it somewhere online. But anyways, I have the red selected, do I here? Yep, so I have the red selected on this graduated filter. And I will just move the hue to about this purple section or this magenta section. Now, obviously, it looks very unnatural, so I'll decrease the saturation just like that. And let me see what happens if I move towards purple. Not as good, so I'll keep it around this magenta or fuchsia color. And I will increase the saturation a little bit more. And let me see with the luminance. No, I'll just keep it at 0. So I like how this photo is looking now. It's very interesting in its color combination. Some people might not like the complement of the green here and the magenta here, or the purple here. And let's see if this green, I don't think I'm going to saturate this green here. This blue hue has a lot of good attention here on its beak. Same with this red. And I don't think I want to add any more detail here to the rocks. There's already enough detail just around here, which is good enough. And let me see here. What else? The highlights are looking good here. It is a little bit blown out here. And the one thing I can probably do is I can go to the vignette section. So I'll go to the FX and I will add a creative vignette. So I will decrease this slightly. We'll keep it around -19. I'll click on this center point and just move it like that. Let's see before and after without the vignette. So I like how this looks. One thing I'm really considering is actually adding more detail to the rocks here. So what I'll do is I will create a mask, another brush here. And I think I will just click on here, click on this. And the flow and opacity, I'll keep it like this. I'll just start painting a little bit of this here. Just like that. And let me see what happens with the clear view plus. I think that looks good, and I'll add a little bit of micro contrast and contrast, so it just adds a little bit more detail to the rocks here. So let me hide this mask here and then show it. So it looks a little bit better now. The other thing is I should be like renaming these masks by double clicking on them and then just changing the name, but it's okay for now. The other thing is there's a little bit of too much highlights here, which I'm not too sure if I want to reduce it or not. Otherwise, this entire image will look a little bit too dark. You can see there's like a shadow or a cast coming from here. I think this is a tree, or is it a rock? I think it's a tree here. I'm not too sure, but yeah, it's a very hard photo to initially fix with a few adjustments, so you do have to play with it. Anyways, if you guys like this photo or if you enjoyed this video tutorial, you know what to do. And as always, live easy, sleep breezy, and stay lovely.